Hi, Ken. It's Jim of Shiloh Call. Um, when I got up this morning, I was surprised to see that you'd already given me not just an answer, but gave me an answer to some of the things that I presented yesterday, just yesterday. So I wanted, first of all, you may not, I thank you. I thank you. First of all, you're so gracious and you're clearly a scholar. And you are the kind of person that I've been seeking so that I can have meaningful conversations with people who will think things through and and has the information. So I'm just thankful that you have engaged. I can't believe you even found my tiny channel and any of my videos, etc. The fact that you then engaged on it, I'm just honored. And I guess I'm also honored that you took this kind of time to engage me further. But admittedly, your response gave me more questions. Well, there are questions that I have that I'm seeking answers for, and your answer, the things you've said, it just draws up questions in me. So let me just say right off that if you're ready to be done, I can respect that. Not everybody expects to be brought into a deeper conversation when they just make a comment. And so forgive me. Thank you for what you've already done and given me. But feel free to disengage from the whole conversation just to be done. But at the risk of pushing my luck, pushing the envelope, I'm going to go ahead and proceed with asking from someone that I think can give me meaningful answers some of the questions that are coming up as you share with me the things that you're sharing with me. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And what I've done, just to kind of give you an idea, just trying to organize a little bit, because let me also say, Ken, this is not, it isn't that I'm so caught up on Miaton Sabbaton. It's interesting to me, but I don't overly care, except for how it fits into so many other things I've also been studying and evaluating and testing. I've been at a lot of things. It all started with beginning to challenge some of the church teachings that I'd received all my life. And in light of some of the teachings that have answered questions I've had all my life, some of the information that I found, and that set me off and into my own path. I'm finding that I'm not finding people, not around me anyway, or not within arm's reach apparently, that have the same kind of interest level I have that causes them to go digging so deep. And I have gone digging with the same kind of ability that you're seeing with regard to Greek. That's how I approach everything. But even so, with the tools and resources I can locate and find, and educating myself to the degrees I think I need to be educated as I'm becoming in Greek. Thank you. More so anyway. That's the approach I've taken to everything. And so let me just, if I could give you just a couple of quick backgrounds to what would be driving me in this conversation, and what might seem argumentative to hang on to something isn't meant to be argumentative in any respect whatsoever, but it's interrelated. None of this for me is now just set off in its own little topic. It's all interrelated. And one of the things I've come to, it goes back probably five years ago now that I started off on this path. And I've been studying, and I've come to, as I've studied the old writings, which everybody wants to call the Old Testament, but I've come to think there is no Old and New Testament. There were the old writings that formed the scriptures, and then we have the new writings that, take the form of the letters of the apostles. Some people will call them apostolic writings. In some of the versions that I've been reading, they're using old writings and new writings, which I've kind of embraced. But we have the scriptures that existed during the days, which included the Septuagint. It was new to them, relatively new anyway. When was that? It had to be in the 3rd century BC that they developed the Septuagint for the Ptolemies. And And I think it's my understanding that probably the Septuagint in the Greek-speaking areas of what would, many would call the Holy Land, it's not Palestine, it's, basically Israel, Yehuda, Judah. There was so much Greek by this time because of, the invasion of Alexander and then the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, etc. Greek had become it had just dominated the area. So I have no doubt, I embrace the idea that the Greek language had become, if not the dominant, one of the primary languages of the area. And the Septuagint was a relatively new, within the last couple hundred years, advent of the translation of the Hebrew Bibles that existed at the time into Greek. You know the stories of the Septuagint. I won't keep going there. So I've come to the opinion that we're not working with an Old Testament and a New Testament. We're talking about one big testament, one big covenant, involving Israel, the chosen people that started with the bloodlines of Abraham, but it's bigger than that now. It's come to involve the Gentiles, the light to the nations and the different things that the Messiah brought to us, so that we didn't, apart from what the church teaches, where the church is teaching that, come with the coming of Messiah at his first advent, that we now have a new covenant, a new covenant people, a new covenant, a new way of doing things. The law, as we would understand it, even the Old Testament writings, period, have application, but they're not for us. I don't want to go too far because I don't want to make this too long, but you get the idea. So I have come to embrace that we as believers would be actually part of Israel in line with the teachings of Paul in Ephesians. So that led me into other studies that led me into the time of the Greeks, that the time that the Seleucids took over from the Ptolemies. And then Antiochus Epiphanes did what he did, which then, one of the first things he did was to eliminate his opposition being the Zadokite priesthood, and Onias, I think it was Onias III, who would not accept his calendar revisions, because the Zadokites, the priesthood, they were responsible for the Moedim, the days, the festival days and the appointed times. So he would not cooperate. So what did Antiochus do? If he wanted his calendar, he deposed Onias. Onias was removed from office, and in his place, his brother, I'm dropping his name, it starts with a J, but it doesn't really matter. Even though he was his brother, he was a Hellenistic stooge. He was a plant and was Hellenistic, and so with him, Antiochus was able to move his calendar in, and that then from his day forward, we had two more Hellenistic priests after that before, in response to all the pressures and the things that Antiochus and these Hellenistic priests had done, in response to that, we had the rise of the Maccabees. And then the Maccabees, who, were champions of the Torah, and of the people, but then they stepped into the role of the priesthood that should have gone back to the Zadokites, who had been deposed, but it wasn't. It was accepted by first Jonathan, then Simon. And so they began a period of time that we have, as the church, come to know as, this is where we turn to this grouping, this period of time when we go looking for Jewish traditions, Jewish ways to do things like the start of the day and other things of that nature. These are the period, these are the groups of people that we're going to that have also become the Pharisees and the Talmudic, the oral traditions that became the Talmud and the different things. So the Pharisaical traditions were all part of this, and that's why we had so much error, in my opinion, by the time Yahushua came on the scene, just 175 years later or 200 years later. So, when that causes me to study what it was that the Zadokites were holding on to. Well, now we find it all in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I know I went along with everybody. We have we have the three major books, maybe a fourth one if you go back in a little time. But there are three major books where they're offering the translations, and then they give us so many commentaries. And in the commentaries, they portray for us the Essenes as this grouping of people. But I think it's pretty evident when you really read the Dead Sea Scrolls and spend time in the Dead Sea Scrolls that the area of Bethabara, which is Qumran, which is where all of that compound existed and where the caves were found, in this area, this would have been a compound where the Zadokite priesthood had coalesced, and people who were trying to stay true to the Torah and what I would call today the remnant of Israel were trying to stay true to the Torah and to the Zadokite ways, which also had some error in them. I mean, well, they weren't perfect, but they were much closer to the Zadokite ways. Well, in the Zadokite ways are calendars, and their calendars are, they align with the Enochian calendar, the 364-day calendars, and then they align with basically a sunrise to sunrise day, and not what they've kept, not what we've learned through Jewish traditions, and now that is being perpetrated in the church. If a church starts trying to keep the Sabbath day, they're going to do it from evening to evening, Friday evening to Saturday evening, because that's what they've been trained to do. They think by correct Jewish tradition, but you got to go back further to that true Jewish tradition to see that the Zadokites, which would have been then Israel, would have been keeping a calendar that ran from morning to morning, sunrise to sunrise. And so with this kind of information, and I'm so sorry, Ken, I feel like the background needs to be given, because armed with this information, when I go about the business of trying to work out and map out the timeline of the Passion Week and the calendar that I think Yahushua would have been on, well, we have him dying on Wednesday, on the Sabbath, on the high Sabbath, which would have been associated with the Feast of Unleavened Bread Sabbath, that first Sabbath of that would have been the day he died. Well, if you start moving 3 days and 3 nights, you arrive, and there's a whole discussion. I could go down this path of, people who want to argue for a 3 p.m. resurrection on the Sabbath day, and that means that you got to do that. They're coming up with a full 3 days and full 3 nights in the belly of the whale, or the belly of the earth, like Jonah was in the belly of the whale, which I think doesn't necessarily need to be that case. But even if it is a full, 24-hour period of time, 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night, 12 hours of day, 12 hours, even if it was that, it still puts the resurrection on the Sabbath day. And if we go to the first day, the day of, as we're going to see is in what you've written here, when we get to the day of the Sabbath, like a day of the next day after the Sabbath, which is, I believe, what you're saying it should be rendered. And we'll confirm it when we get in there or to that. When we're saying it's too late, we have more than 3 days. And if what I'm saying is as a timeline is realistic, you can't have a resurrection on the first day of the week, because that's more than 3 days. And so it's just not, hey, whatever the truth is, I need to follow. That I'm not going to hang on to something so hard that I just will not hear. I don't want to do that. But I also don't want to just quickly and easily give up, especially when things are interrelated, because, that's some of the rationale, if I'm reading you correctly, that's some of the rationale that's being applied. We have to make this work, because that's the only thing that makes this make sense. So I guess I'm applying that too. So I'm sorry, that's a much larger intro than I meant to do. Let me go ahead and just get started on well, here, I started to tell you. What I did, though, is I went and I got your answers so that I could make some comments and just make it a little larger for you to see. I just took your comments and broke it into 4 pages. I I snipped some screenshots, and then I printed them off into a PDF document. Turns out I can't highlight it, but I can underline it with my pencil. So that's what I've done. And I've broken you. I don't know if you can see this. I've broken your comment into page 1, kin page 2, kin page 3, kin page 4. And then I have a couple of other things related to what you've offered as well. So that's what I've done. And if you will indulge me, if you'll indulge me, I just have some questions as we go through this. So let me go ahead and take a pause here. Okay, so let me get started here, and I'm going to kind of read a little bit your response, but you wrote it, so I don't need to be doing that. I guess I'm doing it as much for me as I am for you in this, but you wrote, "Thank you for your response. Indeed, my name is Ken." And thank you. My name is Jim. And I just want to say, well, you go on to say, "Great job picking through the Greek. It isn't always easy to do. Also, my apologies for not transliterating each of the Greek words and phrases. I will try to do better at that. And thank you for the time and thought that you put into this response." And let me just say, everything about your approach, your mannerism, and your scholar, your academia, I'm sure I'm using the wrong words, but everything about you, what you have done and presented to me, only makes me honor you and respect you for what you have done and your approach and the way you're speaking. So thank you. And you're going to say, with regard to Google Translate, I know I'm with you. Google Translate, I don't trust Google at all, and I don't necessarily. It's a tool. It's something to be looked at, but not something to be relied upon. And you're putting into terms because you obviously further down this path and understand and retain better than I do this. But I knew that they're dealing with modern Greek, not Koine Greek, which is why they gave me. Actually, I did not know that it was modern Greek versus Koine Greek, but I knew there was a reason why they were giving me Saturday instead of Sabbath. I knew that to them it was the same, but it was, and thank you. And this is kind of a comical statement. If you have ever tried to read Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, trust me, Ken, I never tried to read Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. And it's just, it strikes me listening to you and speaking to you that, that would be something you would try. But I just never did. I'm not that kind of academic. And, but you're going to say that it was written 600 years ago. And then you're basically talking about the linguistic drift, which I've come to understand. That is how things just change in a language with time and distance and culture and different things. So we have clearly vast differences. Well, maybe not vast, but we have differences between ancient and modern Greek. Well, you're suggesting they're bigger, so maybe vast is closer to a correct response. But here's where we get into some things I want to begin really questioning. You note that, or here you're going to say, also as a note in the use of interlinears, what is translated is in an interlinear isn't really a translation of a phrase. It is properly a translation of solely words in isolation, but does not take into account grammar, syntax, or idiom. And there are instances where some interlinears stray from this and add words not in the text to make things understandable, but they should not be doing that, which I agree with in principle. Thus, when you say this is what is written based on an interlinear, it isn't really. If you think a literal rendering of how it needs to be translated in English without regard for grammar, I recommend taking a look at John 9:14 and answering what the subject of the verb, I'm not even going to try, had made, is solely based on what is written. If you don't take into account how Greek grammar works, then the clay made Jesus, not the other way around. Okay, I think just to make sure that you understand that I do understand these types of things, let me go there real quick and just share. So here's Acts 27 that kind of started our whole conversation, and this is and really they call this an interlinear, so I call it an interlinear. But there are things about this because it's new and I'm learning as we go. And you've already taught me some new things in what I look at when I look at this interlinear here. Well, here's what I'm seeing. We have the Greek in line 7. Here's verse 7. And then they give us the literal written Greek. Above it is what I've come to be, I'm calling it a transliteration. I'm not 100% sure I'm using the right word here, but when we take this what I'm just using looks like in English letters, we take this EV and turn it into an EN, and what this OE type thing into DE. And this TN approach to this TE, I don't have to tell you any further. You know what I'm saying? They've turned this literal Greek writing into what I've been calling transliterated Greek writing. So many in the circles that I've been listening to, when they speak, when they say, in the Greek it was T, mia, ton, sabbaton. Well, is that the Greek? I don't think so. I mean, maybe you. I can imagine this is exactly the kind of thing you know and could educate me on. But this is the literal Greek, and this is some sort of transliterated Greek, miaton, sabbaton. So, and that's all that we in our English societies who don't really know Greek, we don't speak Greek, this is all we will possibly have any hope of relatively pronouncing words correctly on. So that's why we're using this T, miaton, sabbaton, which, is Greek, but I think it's transliterated Greek. It's not the same Greek as this one right below it. Now down here, I know this is what they're calling the interlinear version of this. So when we take this Greek, they're being literal down here. And this is not, when I say what is written, this is not what I'm talking about, because I know that you get into syntax issues, the things that you had mentioned, syntax and what else did you say? Syntax, grammar, and idioms. I get it. So if you think that when I say what is written, this is down here is not what I think is written. Now, clearly they're writing first day of the week, but having come together. And I did go look at John 9, and I'm with you. I know exactly, and I had already kind of experienced this. This is the literal Greek. This is what I'm calling the transliterated Greek, and then this is the interlinear, the word for word type approach without corrections for language, and then you get into this idea where the clay had made Jesus. I get it, and I'm with you on that. I follow that in principle. But when I say what is written, when I referred to that to you, I'm talking about, probably, I mean, these words in the Greek, those words, but also T, mia, ton, sabbaton. These are the words I'm talking about. And so when I say what is written, what I see written in the Greek is T, mia, ton, sabbaton. And that's what I'm referring to, and not the first day of the week down here. The first day of the week down here is what I would challenge in all of this, in which you have, and let me just take opportunity here. It may come up as we keep going through, but this rendition, this rendering of miaton, sabbaton into first day of the week, I think you're saying I kind of that you kind of agree with that. Although I think we're going to get in where you're going to say the first day of the Sabbath, which is like I don't want to butcher what you're saying, but basically you're just saying it. The way it would have been rendered would have been an idiomatic for how they might have said the one day of the Sabbath, meaning the day past the Sabbath. I'm going to take a break here because I do want to go and look at a couple quick things that I thought of. Give me just a second. So Ken, I'm sorry. Let me just tell you where I went to, because it is a little germane to what I just said. And it's something I was thinking of earlier and forgot to do before I started making this video to you. But when I go to Acts 27 and we go from this, this literal T, miaton, sabbaton being translated to the first day of the week, I was thinking in my head that there was a translation or two much more similar to, I think, how you ended up rendering this later in the in your comment, in your reply. But let me just go and just show you what I looked up. So I just went in Acts 27, went to the parallel of Bible Hub, and forgive me, maybe it's too basic, but still, everywhere I look, it's everyone, New International, NIV. First day of the week is the rendering. So every one of these that I'm getting ready to show, just first day of the week. None of them came with your rendition either. They've all given me week for Sabbath and first, the ordinal number, which I will get into here in just a second, over and over and over again. In ESV, Berean Standard, first day of the week. Berean Literal, first day of the week. King James, first day of the week. New King James, first day of the week. New American Standard, first day of the week. NASB 95, first day of the week. 77, first day of the week. Legacy Standard, first day of the week. Amplified, first day of the week. Christian Standard, first day of the week. Holman, first day of the week. American Standard, ASV, first day of the week. Contemporary English, first day of the week. English Revised, ERV, first day of the week. God's Word, and then of course we start getting into, real paraphrase. But that's the idea. I don't really see anything other than first day of the week for the rendering of this tia mia ton sabbaton in Acts 27, which would also then be true, I think, in some of the other passages we get to. Okay, and so before moving on, just to clarify, this is what is written. I mean, the literal Greek that is transliterated ti mia ton sabbaton is what is written. I'm not really terribly worried about the English, that, except for that I think that they're all commonly translating it in a certain way, which I really thought you were affirming. And I guess we'll see as we go if you actually do. I was thinking when I read it this morning the first time that you were affirming that the first day of the week is a reasonable translation. And that's, when we get all of these scholars together, Greek scholars together to help translate these various translations, there's a reason why they are coming up with this, a legitimate reason. And I think that's your argument. I think that remains your argument, but I'll confirm it as we go through. And we'll see. But I think you also render it a different way, which would be interesting as well. So let me just go to page 2 that I've done here, and let me get my pencil. I'm sorry. So onto Greek. To assert that heis, and thus, I'm assuming that's mia. And then I also think you have to throw hin into there. Cannot mean first, misunderstands the role of the cardinal numbers in Greek. Well, maybe. Let me finish reading and then I'll come back to this. And then let me ask the question that I have to challenge that. I say challenge it. That's not how I want to do it. I just want to say, well, I have questions, and it makes me kind of step back from it. And let me just go finish reading and then I'll come back to this. So usually ordinal numbers are used to refer to first, second, etc. Cardinal numbers, and especially heis, are also used to refer to things like first, second, and third. This is especially true when it modifies nouns of time, the temporal use you noted in your recent video, which I'm assuming this is your Sabbath time, and the temporal idiom that I referenced, where they're using mia to modify time because of the idiom temporal use, the idiomatic temporal use, I guess, but there are just more things to it than that, I think. We see this multiple times in biblical passages outside the phrases where it's used in conjunction with sabbaton, as well as in secular Greek. Well, I can't speak to secular Greek, but I have been trying to find things in the scriptures. For example, Revelation 9:12, we read, the first mia, woe, is past. And I'm aware of this one, and this is, but I have seen, in fact, give me just a quick second. So I'm going to Revelation 9:12 that you just showed to me, and here's the Greek, and here's the mia, and then but here is the, and I think what you're offering as the use of mia to be ordinal instead of cardinal, where the literal translation is woe, the first has passed. So mia is being translated as first, but when I go to the parallel, the first woe has passed is commonly used. There's the NIV, the NLT, the ESV, Berean Standard, Berean Literal, all using that. But when we get to King James, they chose to translate they chose to translate the mia as one. I'm sorry. In this moment, I'm realizing what transliterate is meaning. So really, the words below would be the transliterated. I don't know. I better stop going that direction. But here you've got King James with one woe is past, and then do we have any more Legacy Standard says one woe is past, and when you go one woe, it makes just as much sense in this context as saying the first woe is past. So whether you say first woe is past, behold, two woes are coming, or one woe is past, two woes are coming, it's all the same meaning. Nothing has changed when we go back and forth between those two. But I would say that the use of mia as first in this passage is one of the, and I'm going to go visit it here in a second. It's one of the very rare instances where Mia is used as first. It's just rare. And in a way, I guess you'd have to say it's a bit suspect, because this is really, in fact, it's the only first that I'm aware of. We'll have to see when I get there, because I've got a list of them that I did when I studied it. But this is what you're saying, that this is a time when the cardinal number Mia was used as and translated as first, and I think you're saying appropriately so, and I think you can in context, but Mia could have just been one as well. It could have been, woe, the one has passed. That's how it strikes me, and I don't really know how to receive that differently. I mean, okay. All right. So let's go back up, though, to the use of Mia as in the realm of the number 1 up here that I want to talk about with regard to the role of cardinal numbers. So here we are back at Acts 20, verse 7, where we have Mia tone Sabbaton. Well, when you've got the Mia, and then you have the Strong's number they give me, 1520. And when we go there, it doesn't give me Mia, it gives me the masculine version, as I've come to understand it to be now. In fact, let me go back here very quickly. I've learned you have shown me some interesting things. I've just come to understand what, so here we've got this. Let me see if I can hover over it. Yeah, it's an adjective, dative, feminine, singular. I now understand what that means, and thank you. And here's the noun, genitive, neuter, plural. And we need to match these two things. That's the objective here and the issue. But let's go to this. So if you were just an average guy, you're going to think you're going to be looking up this Greek and this, Mia version of it. And you're going to go there. You're going to get there by hitting 1520, but it takes us to heis, which is the masculine version of it. I'm coming back to here in just a second, because down here when we start talking about including the neuter hin, that's how I knew you were talking about hin in that, in your how you rewrote the text there. It goes on to give, see also, first of all, it's giving me all these potential numbers. Here's a primary numeral, 1, abundantly man, 1, another, only, other, some. Nothing ordinal in there, but still, it does give me this phrase and this word, and then there's Mia. When I go into Mia, I don't know why they didn't give me in Acts 27 this Strong's, this Strong's word. I'm sorry, but that's Mia. And here I get what did it just show? It's an adjective, and I thought, yeah, irregular feminine. So it's all making sense with what you're saying, affirming that it means 1, and then they're putting in first. And then here they're saying first, 1, other. These are the 3 potential options they're giving to us. And it's the irregular feminine of heist, 1 or first, a certain, agree, first, 1, X or other. So they are saying that, no question, they're saying that, that heis, and I don't really need to keep going there. But they are saying that it could mean first, could mean 1, could mean other. This is also the area, it's under Mia, where I start getting the various uses of the topical index, where we get into the temporal idiom that I was referring to, and singular enumeration, 1, and then exclusive emphasis. And only in the first, as a temporal idiom, which I think is what you're saying, are we getting into the use of Mia as first. But now let's go back to heis, because this is where I get more information. Apparently, the fact that they are masculine and feminine doesn't necessarily change the meaning. Because when I go back to heis, this is where I get, I know this is the NASB, this is one translation, but this is what they have done with Mia throughout, or heis, I should say, Mia and or heis, throughout and actually I do think it's Mia, because when I go looking up all these various passages there, it's always Mia. But when I look at how it was translated, all of these things seem to fit that either other or first, or actually not first, other or 1. Because all of the uses where it's taken what would be 1, definition of 1, and let me just start there, because here is 1, 282 times, and I'm not telling you anything. I know that. I know you know that. But here are all the other options I could throw in there that have nothing to do with cardinal or ordinal. agreement one time, alike one time, alone 3 times, common once, detail once, first 9 times. But this is what we're after. This is what I'm challenging. The use of mia, which is a cardinal number, as a first 9 times. And if you just left it there, okay. But the specific 9 times, they're just germane to the whole discussion. And so we have to come back to that. But then we have individual, individually, lone, man, nothing, one another, one man, one thing, one person, single, smallest, someone's, 39. I don't really know what that is. One time. Okay, and unity. So really almost everything has to do with one or other, except for these 9 times that we used in first. Well, I have organized that, and I'm going to show it to you here. Back a year and a half ago, when I did my first foray into this, I organized all of this because I went into down here we get into the, where is it where I get into it? Like the Hebrew, here's where we're using it as first, and here are the various passages. So of the 9 passages, I organized all of the mia, the 9 passages I could locate where mia was used as first. I organized that, and I did the same thing when we got to Sabbaton, because when we get to Sabbaton, the same thing's happening, and they're telling us that Sabbaton is Sabbath, and it's used as Sabbath. It's written 59 times. Is that right? 59 times? Yeah. No, it would be more than 59 times. 59, 68 times total. 58 times it was given to us as Sabbath. 1 time as sabbaths, and I think you addressed that in your comments. And then week, it was translated as week 9 times, the exact same number of times that mia was translated as first. But why are we going from Sabbath to week? And I know you've given me a few reasons. That's not what I'm saying. But in the context of what I've been evaluating and looking at, this is what I've been working at. So let me go from here to some work that I've done, that I did way back when I organized this. And I noted this is just a printout of a spreadsheet. Let me get my pencil here. Okay, so I looked up high Sabbaton or miatone Sabbaton. And again, I'm illiterate in this, but here I just pulled out the 282 times that they went with 1, left all the other extras out, but pulled the 282 times for 1, and then 9 times for first. And then for Sabbaton, I pulled out the 58 times for Sabbath, 1 time for Sabbath, and then the 9 times for week. Well, obviously I didn't go looking at the passages related to 1 or Sabbath, but I did go looking at the passages related to first and week, the 9 passages together. And the first one we see is Matthew 28:1, and these are just my consolidations and ways to organize where we have first and week, the use of heis or mia for first. And so I will lose this column, but here's how it's actually written in the NASB. Now, after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn on the first day of the week. And then Strong's, when you just simply take Strong's and just break it down, just let it, what do I mean by that? Let me go back to this passage, and we go back here and we go to Strong's. Literally just, am I doing this right? Let me get back into Strong's. Yeah. They're giving that, but it's on mia of the tone week. So, but where did I get that? That's not it. Let me see if it's in the lexicon where I got that. 1, the Sabbath. I think I pulled it from there. Yep, I think that's it. 1, the Sabbath. I believe that's where I pulled this, where I wrote down 1, the Sabbath. I'm sure that's where it was. Okay, and then it goes on to be, and that of course is, this is after the resurrection, after the crucifixion, and related to the resurrection, because whatever this day is going to be is the day that Yahushua has arisen. Okay, and then we have Mark 16:2. It's the same account. It's the same time frame. Whatever this day is that we have treated as very early on the first day of the week, and 1 the Sabbath again, but literally being it's miatone Sabbaton. And I guess also in Matthew it was mian Sabbaton. You would know why it's mian. I've always had to speculate why. But mian Sabbaton, where Mark is one of the first uses of miatone Sabbaton. But they translated it the same way, and Strong's did the same thing. And then we have Mark 16:9. Now this is a little bit different because we're getting into pro-T, which you know better than I did. But I do want to visit this passage because this is part of what we're talking about later. But, this is one where they've translated as he had risen very early on the first day of the week, when in truth, this word should be first, pro-T, first. Chief, the Sabbath is how they would really be doing it. So where they have also taken Sabbath and turned it into a week, they've taken chief and first as in order, ordinal, but as in importance, not in timing. Forgive me. And they've translated that as first. And then we have Luke 18:12, which is a one-off. I get that's Sabbaton without Mia, if I remember right, where we see Sabbaton translated as week without the benefit of Mia there. Let me go see if that's the case here. Yeah. Yep. Yes, there's no Mia in that in there. So, and then we get into Luke 24:1, and it's the same. This is the resurrection event, the same event as Mark 28, Mark 16, and even Mark 16:2 and 16:9. Translated as first day of the week. All these things together. So let me just finish. John 20 is the same. 20 verse 1 is the same thing. John 20:19 is later in that day. Later in that day, on the first day of the week, they've taken, I believe that's Miaton Sabbaton, because down here I've just organized everything I could find in the Strongs and I just organized it all. And so when I get to 2019, it says it is Mia Sabbaton, no Miaton, just Mia Sabbaton, and they've translated that as when it was evening on that day, the first day of the week again, though. But they did the same thing with it. They've basically taken Mia, Sabbaton, which are together in a little different manner, but they're still together, and translated as first day of the week. Then we have Acts 20, verse 7, which we already know about. Then we have 1 Corinthians 16:2, where they're talking about the first day of every week. And how is that worded? This is not related to the resurrection. This is, of course, related to Paul's instructions as to when and how they're to gather their offerings, their alms and tithes. And so let me go look and see. So it was really Mian Sabbaton. So this is like what we saw appear in Matthew, Mian Sabbaton. And they translated that as first day of the week again. But it's not related. While Mian and Sabbaton are together again, it's not relating to the resurrection day. And then we have Revelation 9 that we already talked about, which is the first woe where they used Mia as the first instead of one. But no Sabbaton here. But these are the 9 each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3. I'm counting the weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And for first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They are together. Of the 9 times, 2 of those times, Sabbaton is off by itself, translated as week, and Mia is off by itself, being translated as first. The other 7 times, they're always together. The feminine adjective Mia and the neuter noun Sabbaton. And this is the only place we are seeing it in the scriptures. If it's elsewhere, I've missed it. I can't find it. And back then I was looking, and I have looked because I've done this topic a number of times since. So the relationship between Mia and Sabbaton, this female adjective and this neuter noun, seems to have a very special place in context of defining Heis or Mia as one. In defining Heis or Mia as first, and in the context of defining Sabbaton as week. So it all seems to be related, and it makes it a bit suspect, if I can say that. Why are they doing that? Now, I think you're going to explain. We're going to go back. I think you're going to explain to me why that is happening, and some of the other things that are outside of what we've got in scriptures that give some credence to this. So, going back to your comments, I don't want to lose track of the site that you are basically. Your point here is that you are saying it is not unusual for cardinal numbers to play the role of ordinal numbers in Greek. So let me also go back and just say, no, I'm not saying it cannot mean first. I'm just saying it rarely does. It just seems to rarely do that because we've got isn't it proti? Isn't that what it is? Let me quickly go look at Mark 9, see if I have it pulled up. I'm thinking I did. Yes, we have this word proti, which means first. Actually, that's the first or foremost. What was, but it's still first. Where did I see? I just saw a, there was elsewhere that I was, well, here's proton. So here it is, first, ordinally, firstly, before, at the beginning. So this one is related to first, and somewhere, and maybe it's going to be in what we, it's all running, got a lot going on, and maybe it's all running together. But here's this idea of proton being first in proti, and I think this one is more related to chief, like the very first thing. Let me look at that one more time real quick. Yeah, first, foremost, chief, principal. Okay. All right, let's go back here. But so I'm not arguing that it can mean first. I'm just saying it would rarely mean first. And if you take away Mia being used as first, the 9 times that I've given, then you really only have just a few translations of Mia into first. But here we go on to the Septuagint in Numbers 1:1, which you gave as an example. Here's our Mia. You've got in Mia 2, and I'm butchering, Minos Tau Deutero, which is where English translations universally have first day, even though there's no day in here. You're saying that we need a day, I guess because this being an adjective, Mia being an adjective, we need a feminine noun for it to be. And this is the Minos, must be ta Minos, of the second month. This must mean something related to the second month. But you go on to say it's being universally translated as the first day of the second month. And I suppose, I wonder if it could be rendered day 1 of the second month. Would it be more? It makes me wonder. You would know. I have to speculate because I don't know Greek. If they're saying first day, why can't I say day 1? Just like they did in Revelation, was it 9:12, where instead of saying the first woe is past, why don't they just say woe number 1 is past, one woe is past, woe number 1 is past? Why don't we say day 1 of the second month? Why isn't it being rendered that way? Why are we taking this Mia to become evidence for first? And if there's not a Greek reason to do it, then I question the validity of doing it, and it becomes evidence for the use of Mia as first, but only evidence because it's being used inappropriately, and this should be day 1 of the second month. That's just what I question when I see this. Here we see the cardinal number 1 in both Hebrew and Greek, but to make proper English, we translate it as ordinal first. But day 1 would be, day 1 of the second month is proper English. We could have done that if that also would meet the requirements of Greek. But also day is missing in both Hebrew and Greek, so that's what you're saying. You need to insert the day, and I guess because that's what you've been saying all along, and I don't argue with that. Day is missing, so you have to say. So it would have said 1 of the second month. If you didn't have day, it would be just something like Mia, the 1 of the second month. Is that Greek, proper Greek? Would they have known? Would they have spoken it that way? We're just 1 of the second month. And then they know idiomatically that they mean the first day of the second month. And so they know that idiomatically that 1 of the second month is the first day of the week. But if they really meant to, they meant to say it idiomatically. And if they meant to say it as in the other way they could say it, which is the first day of the month, they would have been something like prote, and in proti, first ordinary, or proton, or something like that. The second, okay, so you get the idea. So only if we are making this first, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't see why it must be first. Why cannot 1 take the place here? Why cannot 1 be, just like we're doing, I did with the whole, and the questioning, and I think we'll get to it here, so I'll just stop. But I'm talking about the questioning where I said on one of the Sabbath days to try to make it as one of the options to make the gender align. Okay, so let's keep going. As seen in Numbers 1, it's common for Greek to omit words when they are clear from idiom and context. Now, when you say it this way, I get the idea that we're talking about omit words when we're talking about idiomatic use makes it, and context makes it reasonable to do so. But when you say when they are clear from idiom and context, I think that has meaning to you that it doesn't have to me. When you say they are clear from, I don't know what clear from idiom and context means. But what I infer it to mean is that it's common to omit the Greek words when idiomatically and from context they're superfluous. You just don't need them. This is called ellipsis. Similarly, in Matthew 10:42, Jesus says, whoever gives a cup of cold water, and then water was left out, to one of these little ones will not lose his reward. Is absent in Greek, but implied with the adjective cold. Not arguing with that. I'm not going to spend more time here because I've already taken way too much time for you. I'm sorry. But this is how big the topic is for me. Sorry. Okay, so and similarly in Luke 1:64, we see Zachariah's mouth was open immediately and his tongue loosed. I get all of this. It's basically going back to this very idea of omitting words when it's appropriate to do so. But I'll just make a comment before I move off of this and we go to the third page here that I'm not sure that the idea that we're missing day in Sabbaton, in Acts 27 and in these various passages that we're talking about, we have miaton, Sabbaton, and we don't have day. It's making me wonder where that I did see that. But anyway, I think it was in another video that I did that I just saw, to tell you the truth, now that I think about it. But anyway, okay, I'm rambling. I'll just say that this is not for me so convincing that the fact that we have lost the feminine day, they just didn't put it in there because, really this almost fits to me without knowing if it's got Greek limitations. It almost fits when you say he omitted the word. It says and on one of the Sabbath days should have been how that should have been written. And we just omitted the word because it's superfluous. Maybe it's clear from idiomatic and contextual requirements. I don't really know. Let's go to page 3. Ellipses are well documented, not just in the New Testament, but in the papyri and Hellenistic inscriptions. Okay. Thus, and I don't argue. But again, let me get my pencil. Again, I'm not sure that, I don't know. I don't know that it really matters in the context. If what I'm talking about can be done in the Greek, then I'm wondering why it isn't being done in the Greek. Thus, if a phrase doesn't make sense, such as a feminine adjective seemingly modifying a neuter noun. So I get it. This is the crux of the matter here. We've got Mia seemingly modifying a neuter noun. So then the proper course of action would be to look for another word in context. Well, what word? If we're going to insert day anyway, it really becomes a matter of placement of the word. Right after Mia, we would insert a day, or right after Sabbath day. Well, it sure seems like if we have, through this ellipse, eliminated day, and now we have this unequal feminine adjective modifying a neuter noun, why aren't we adding day to Sabbath days? Why aren't we doing that? Which would then align, in my estimation, align the feminine adjective with a feminine noun, as you had mentioned earlier, and which would effectively, I think, turn the Sabbath into some sort of an additional adjective. I don't know what you'd call that in language, you would. But basically, it's now just giving us some more description of that noun day, to help us understand. Or an idiom that could relate, as opposed to assuming that multiple New Testament writers made a grammatical mistake that needs to be corrected, or that someone changed the text after the fact, especially given that there is zero textual evidence for such a change. Let me say before I even comment anything else, I did offer that as one of the potential things, but I dismiss it, same as you. I dismiss it. I don't think we're going to get Dr. Luke, Matthew, John, Mark, and Paul all making the same grammatical mistakes. But I do have questions as to why a Mark would use Mia at one time and then proti and the next time. And I'll be coming back to that, hopefully. And then also when we get into this idiom, when we get into an idiom, look for another word in context or an idiom. Okay, but when we start talking about an idiom, we're going to have some sort of evidence that that is the appropriate idiom that would have been commonly used in the day. And I think. Okay. The point of my original comment was that because the original readers knew how Greek grammar works and knew that there is always a gender agreement between nouns and adjectives that modify them, they would have naturally looked for what word was missing, which I agree with. This is redundant, but I agree would be day. But why wouldn't day follow Sabbath instead of the first day or one day? I think you do address it here in just a little bit. But why wouldn't it follow Sabbath days, one of the Sabbath days? Because that's what it seems to be leading to. It's what it just seems to be driving in that direction. Okay, so we'll look for what was missing, relying on an idiom. So the idea is that we have some idiom of the time that was causing them to take mia Sabbaton to understand that to be one day. Here it is, day of the Sabbath. This is where you are talking about it, I believe it's day of the Sabbath and how, give me a second here. Forgive me, Ken. I just wanted to go see how you put it. And one day of the Sabbath, which we're going to talk about in the next page here, is what you're referring to. And that might be, and that would have been idiomatically understood as one day of the Sabbath is the day after the Sabbath, as though it's one day removed of the Sabbath. And we'll come back to that. But basically what we're saying is they would have been looking for, they would have filled in the missing word, relying on idiom and or context, which again, I'm saying would be Sabbath days in my estimation. And for us to do anything less misses how the original readers would have processed the phrase. I can agree with that. But the question is, are we doing it in the same manner that they would have understood it to be? That's my question. And indeed, there is a common idiom in first century Jewish Greek that provides day with Sabbath. In the Septuagint Greek, the phrase, not going to try it, ti himera ton Sabbaton, and I understand this word to be day. So day of Sabbath, the day of the Sabbath, okay, translates as this. Now, I'm not sure what, maybe you've gone off and left me here. In its Septuagint Greek, the phrase this translates this, and I don't know what we're really saying here. We see this in, okay, maybe you're going on to explain it. We see this in the Leviticus, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and perhaps a few other places I missed. This idiom is then picked up by the New Testament Greek. For instance, see Luke. So Dr. Luke does it in both Luke and Acts. So at least Dr. Luke is picking it up, apparently. And in other places where Greek has day of the Sabbath, but they are referring to, when they say day of the Sabbath, to a Sabbath day. Okay, interesting. I'm not 100% sure what you would be saying here, because really this seems to be lending weight to what I'm questioning and what I'm asking. And why aren't we saying one of the Sabbath days if we need day in there, and if it was idiomatically left out of what should have been filled in? Because here we're getting into this ti himera ton Sabbaton, referring to the Sabbath day. They understand that to be day of the Sabbath, to be Sabbath day. And this is the use that I think we're seeing, that you're saying we're seeing where it was done. The day of the Sabbath was ultimately translated as an understanding to be a Sabbath day, and that Luke did it, at least Luke did it, in the New Testament, where he said day of the Sabbath to refer to the Sabbath day. Okay. This demonstrates that the plural doesn't necessarily mean Sabbath in plural, but is an artifact of the idiom translated into Greek. Okay. So ultimately what is happening is the phrase is that the writer intends the phrase to read as ti mia himera ton Sabbaton, the first day of the Sabbaths. Okay. The first day of the Sabbaths. Why wouldn't it be on one of the Sabbath, on one day of the Sabbaths? I don't know, but we're going to first when it seems like I don't have a good reason why Mia can't also be one here. On one day of the Sabbath, on one day of the Sabbath. I just don't see why that also doesn't work. Or seen with a change in case, Mia and Himera, and with or without a definite article, but intentionally omitted because it was obvious due to both idiom and grammar. I just, maybe But I think you're saying that idiomatically, everybody would have understood it to be first day rather than one day. But I struggle with that because it literally just means, I mean, if you just, like what we're doing, if it means one, it just means one day of the Sabbath. And it can have effectively the first, the very same impact. And now whether or not they're trying to say first day, become ordinal instead of cardinal, because we need it to be the first day of the Sabbath. I'm assuming you're now, I'm getting too far out here, and we'd have to have more discussion to really get it down. But I mean, I've heard people teaching that you got 52 Sabbaths, so the first day of the Sabbaths. Well, what's the first day of the Sabbaths? What do you mean by Sabbath? First of all, most Sabbaths, are there any Sabbaths that are multiple days? I don't know. So why would you have a first day of a Sabbath? I don't know. And if you're going to have multiple Sabbaths, if we are talking about a plural Sabbath, literally plural Sabbath, what would be the Sabbaths? We'd have 52 Sabbaths plus the holy, those associated with the Moedim. And usually my understanding is that when they're talking about, in ordinal sense, the Sabbaths, they're talking about the 52. But why would we say the first day of the Sabbath? Why would we be saying that? Why wouldn't we just say the first of the Sabbaths? Why do we even, I don't know. This is larger than what I can do here, and I'm just wasting your time, I think. So let me go back. Let me go to page 4. One concern you expressed is why Sabbath is rendered as week. I don't think it is in the mind of the original reader. Instead, the Sabbath was day of the Sabbath. This is where you were explaining that the day after the Sabbath, or Sunday, was denoted idiomatically as one day of the Sabbath, as if one day removed from the Sabbath. Our Tuesday would be 2 days removed from the Sabbath. And I'm not really arguing, but I don't know how that, well, actually, again, we're just, I think you have to be talking about the first and the second. You have to turn Mia into first, or you have to turn it into ordinal to make week become an issue at all. But again, it's all together. We only have 9 times that Sabbath is turned into a week, and 7 of those times alongside of Mia, and I'm not sure that it doesn't fit without doing that. So I'm not sure that we really need or have an idiomatic expression here. I mean, this can be. I get the rationale, I get the reasoning, I get what you're saying. But does it make it so? Does it make it that's what the intent of both the writer and the reader was? The intents of the writer and the reader were at this time. It's not a strong enough case for me so far. You note there are no other examples where Mia modifying Sabbaton is translated as the first day of the week. This isn't quite accurate. And I have seen the Septuagint. In fact, I've got, let me see if I can get this to turn over. Yeah. So, here I see this, and I have seen it. This has been pointed out. I had done just a quick show. I had also done a video called Miaton Sabbaton. Is it an idiom for first day of the week? Just recently, as a matter of fact, where I had gone on a search for these various things. And I did see Psalm 24, and we're dealing with the superscriptions and different things, which you are pointing out here. And that I see. I mean, I see it right here. It is my, right here is my Mian Sabbaton, and it's rendered as on the first day of the week. Okay. And these don't exist in the Masoretic text that is the basis for most most English translations. As you probably know, the Septuagint is a Jewish translation roughly contemporaneous with the New Testament. Yeah, a couple 300 years earlier, being slightly older, and the basis for New Testament quotes from the Old Testament. I agree with that. But here we're just saying these are the superscriptions you're talking about that I just looked up. You got Psalm 24, and it really isn't one. It's the superscription to Psalm 24, where they rendered it as first day of the week, a psalm for the first day of the week, which you don't. Yeah, like you said, we don't see that in the Masoretic text, and we have something similar down here. So what do those mean? The good news is we have extra biblical Jewish sources that tell us that the Jewish temple service had daily readings in the Psalms, and that Psalm 24 was to be read on the first day of the week. And this is the exact same evidence that I had seen where that's what they're offering here, that we have extra biblical evidence related to the Septuagint in Psalm 24, because this is how they were actually operating and aligning it, so it would become in the midst of their worship services how they were, the day of the week that they're doing it. And I suppose, but the but for me in this is, while that might be the case, could it be? I really don't know for sure. I can't tease mias Sabbaton. I don't know, and I'll quit talking like that. But what I would say is that there are still, for me, very few, the vast majority of mia should be translated as one, a cardinal one. The evidence offered to me that it can be occasionally ordinal is so related. I mean, how many did I see here? 10, and 7 of them are tied into Sabbaton and this whole intermixed thing, that if we didn't do it there, and if that was a wrong translation, it should have been one of the Sabbath days or something similar to that, then does it are those renderings of into first correct or appropriate? I mean, I think you can make the case for correct. You can make a case for it and call it correct, but is it appropriate? So before I leave, let me go visit Mark in the sense that I wanted to here real quick, and then I'll let you go. So here's the question I had with regard to Mark. And in Mark 16, verse 2, he uses the word here, mia, and then ton, sabbaton. So he is, and it's being rendered as first day of the week. If he meant mia to be ordinal and not cardinal, and not one of the Sabbaths or something similar, one of the Sabbath days maybe. If he meant mia to be ordinal, okay, that would be maybe in line with, Matthew and a John and a Luke. But when we get to chapter or verse 9, now he's utilizing proti, I believe that's the word. The legitimate, ordinal, first, foremost, chief principle, a legitimate, ordinal number that is being rendered first. So he writes proti sabbato, which is just, I'm sure you know better than I, another version of the word Sabbath, another, case or whatever makes that look like a different word, but it's proti sabbaton, and it's being rendered first of the week. And we have the ordinal, we have this word first being driven by proti. Well, I guess a question that I have that also adds wonder to me is, why would the same author, Mark, just a few verses earlier, write mia to denote an ordinal sense of that day, and then turn around in just a few verses later, utilize proti as the word that he uses for, to denote the ordinal sense of first day of the week, first. So just a question that I wanted to add to the equation. I'm sorry, Ken. I also just remembered what it was I was trying to think of that was distracting me throughout the video here. But I want to quickly, before I also leave you, this is just a write-up in the back of the ISR, Institute for Scripture Research, and their translation called The Scriptures. In the back, they offer topographically, they deal with various topics, and here's one of the, dealing with the first day of the week. And this is their write-up, and is part of what I think, just part of my analysis, part of, my framework, my paradigm. So it goes on to read, the underlying Greek text is miaton sabbaton, which literally translated means one of the Sabbath or Sabbaths, but is traditionally rendered as first day of the week. The term first day of the week is literally translated as proti himerati hebdomada in Greek, but nowhere appears as such in the second writings. And I guess that would be one of the questions I would have to somebody who knows like you is why aren't they just, if they're trying to say first day of the week, aren't they just saying prote himerati hebdomada? Why, if that's what they meant, why aren't they saying that? Why would they go about a cryptic, idiomatic way of saying it? I don't know. We're only left to surmise and speculate and do all the things we do. But nowhere does it appear in the second writings of the New Testament. There is a strong argument that mioton sabbaton should be rendered according to Semitic idiom as day one of the week. So here they've turned this back into mia into one. They've added day, to make it, I guess, to add the feminine noun, and then they've added this of the week. But where do we get that? I don't find that you can't back that up. Why would we say this is day one of the week if we don't use the it's self what do you call that when it is self proving? You go and use how it's being used in the scriptures. You go and look at how it has been used in the scriptures to say that's how it should be used in the scriptures. That's how it kind of feels to me in this. So that's where I'm really at. So if I'll finish up here. Let me just again say, Ken, thank you. And if I get it, if you don't have time or inclination for any of this, then don't. I understand. But it's not, if it seems like I'm argumentative, I'm not, again, I'm being redundant here, but I'm not being argumentative, but I'm also not just, I can't just receive it. I have too many other reasons why. If you turn it back into one of the Sabbath days or on one of the Sabbaths, it makes other things align, which I think was, well, actually, you know what, that occurs to me. Let me go back because I do want to finish up with that thought, because that's what you're basically saying. Jewish temple service, was happening with the first day of the week, where they did literally use, read the 21st Psalm on the first day of the week, which is offered as evidence, I believe, that it affirms itself. It must be true because that's what they were doing. And if it isn't what that means idiomatically, then quite frankly, it makes the other renderings of the Septuagint's phrase at the start of Psalm 24 somewhat perplexing. Agreed. I don't know what to do with that, but I will say that when we say, thus we have definitive evidence from contemporaneous Jewish sources that Psalm 24 is for the first day of the week, which aligns perfectly if the form of mioton sabbaton is translated as the first day of the week, and quite frankly makes any, and this is what I came back here for, quite frankly makes any other rendering of the Septuagint's phrase at the start somewhat perplexing. Well, that's what I'm dealing with when I am addressing what you're sharing with me, because for it to be the first day of the week, it begins to cause problems with an otherwise harmonious timeline. Things that I've been able to put together and do that is harmonious with the events happening on day, on one of the Sabbaths, on that seventh day he has arisen. And if you wait until the first day, quite frankly, nobody's timelines work. Nothing meaningful can work, in my opinion. So that's part of what I'm addressing here, is that in the same way that we are saying, well, we need first day of the week in relationship to first 24 to mean what I'm saying it means, which is first day of the week, mia sabbaton is first day. We need it to mean that. Otherwise, what we're reading and seeing is perplexing. And I agree with that. But I will say that there's only one, or how many occurrences of it are there? The two in the Psalms that you've offered? And are there any other potential solutions to that? I really don't know the answer to that. And if it remains just the true thing, then, if you had a ballast, on both sides, which one is providing the evidences that become more weighty and more meaningful? Well, that's what I'm left to decide, and that's where I'm at. And that's why I've involved you again, Ken, because you clearly have knowledge and interest in at least these aspects, if not everything I'm interested in, you're interested in the correct rendering of that phraseology, mia ton Sabbaton. And so, all right, thank you, Ken, and may you be blessed. Bye-bye.